Welcome, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm going to give you a moment to connect to the audio here. Welcome, welcome. Give you just one more moment. Come on in, come on in.
Hello, good afternoon.
Hello.
Looks like everybody is not muted by default, so I'm going to adjust that setting. Good afternoon to you. It's good to see you.
Hello.
Give me one moment. Well, I will take care of that after the introduction. Well, welcome to this first Friday lecture for the month of October 2025. Our speaker today is Basic Program Distinguished Instructor, Sheffield Family Distinguished Instructor, Kendall Sharp. Kendall's lecture is entitled Free Men and Natural Slaves in Homer's Iliad and Aristotle's Politics. This First Friday lecture is supported by the Anastopoulos Lecture Series Fund in memory of Basic Program Instructor George Anastopoulos. My name is Noah Shafitz, and I am the Cyril O'Hoole Chair of the Basic Program. Please note that this presentation is being recorded so that we can make it available on the Graham School YouTube channel. During the lecture and during the question and answer period that follows it, once I make the necessary adjustments, you will not be able to unmute your microphones. And in the meantime, please do not unmute your microphones. But we invite you to enter questions for Kendall in the chat box at any time during the event. After Kendall finishes his lecture, he will have a chance to respond to your questions. During the lecture, Kendall and I will be able to see only a handful of your video feed, so you may choose to leave your video on or to turn it off at your discretion. Kendall's video will be spotlighted, so the best way to view the lecture is to select speaker view instead of gallery view. You might want to do that now. Before I give Kendall a full introduction, let me tell you a little bit about the Basic Program and the Graham School of Continuing Liberal and Professional Studies at the University of Chicago. So along with the Basic Program, the Graham School offers an array of programming, including our Masters of Liberal Arts program and our open enrollment courses, as well as a number of events and travel study opportunities. Since 1946, the Basic Program has offered students a rigorous education in the liberal arts through direct engagement with original texts in discussion-based courses led by highly dedicated instructors. At the heart of the Basic Program is our 4-year core sequence, which offers firsthand encounters with some of the greatest works of the classical and Western traditions in a community of adult learners, and that collection of works includes the two that Kendall will discuss today. Our registration for the winter is now open, and our sections tend to have a tendency to fill up quickly, so I recommend that if you have not done so already, you reserve your spots as soon as you can. Our next First Friday lecture will take place on November 7th. Our speaker will be Basic Program Instructor David Shiner, and the title of David's lecture will be Philosophy Before Socrates. Our next, today's speaker, Kendall Sharp, is the Sheffield Family Distinguished Instructor in the Basic Program of Liberal Education for Adults. Kendall holds a PhD from the Committee on Social Thought and a BA from the College at the University of Chicago. Formerly, he was an assistant professor in the Department of Classical Studies at the University of Western Ontario, and he has taught also at DePaul University, where he taught history, at the University of Illinois at Chicago, where he taught classics, and in the college, where he taught in the humanities core. Kendall rejoined the Basic Program in 2019, having last served on the staff from 1999 to 2000. His research and publishing focus on Plato's dialogues as literary expressions of the philosophical life, and his teaching has included Greek and Latin languages, classics and translation, and both classical mythology and ancient Greek science. Now, let me hand things over to Kendall. Give me one moment.
Thank you, Noah. And I'll take over your screen now. Mission accomplished?
I think we did it. Take it away, Kendall.
Well begun is half done. So thank you for coming, everybody. My title is Free Men and Natural Slaves in Homer's Iliad and Aristotle's Politics. In the basic program, we read Homer's Iliad, and a question usually arises right away about how Achilles treats Agamemnon. Namely, how can he treat his leader this way? Isn't Achilles guilty of insubordination? These questions have straightforward answers, but here's the thing. The answers open up a new aspect of the poem and help us understand Achilles' wrath in a whole new way. The straightforward answers are no, Agamemnon does not outrank Achilles as in modern armies. He has command only on the battlefield. In the camp, Agamemnon is the first among equals, where he leads his equals by persuasion in assemblies and council meetings. The equals, in their turn, follow Agamemnon voluntarily and consensually. The Greek army, therefore, runs itself by institutions which Homer's original audience would recognize as polis institutions. Achilles has been submitting to Agamemnon, but without subordinating himself. And here's the new aspect. If Achilles is not being insubordinate, then why does he not just go on home? He threatens to do so. As we'll see, he also almost kills Agamemnon on the spot. So why does he exercise such self-restraint in just these two instances and then enter a state of paralysis for 2/3 of the poem? If we ask him by reviewing what he says, we'll find answers that have resonance for the present moment at the present time. For Achilles is talking about what goes wrong when the leader of a government of equals abuses the public trust for personal reasons and rules his equals not with what Aristotle calls political rule, but with rule by a master commanding household slaves. Now we have converted our original problem of why Achilles acts so freely toward Agamemnon into a different question. Why does Achilles neither kill Agamemnon nor actually go on home with his men? If Achilles is motivated by honor, he could save his honor by violent retaliation. If he thinks Agamemnon has broken the terms of a social contract, then he might just head home and rule his myrmidons. Instead, he is paralyzed until Book 17. Here's my answer. Achilles faces an impasse between killing Agamemnon versus heading home because neither choice will satisfy his chief desire. His chief desire is to maintain membership in the community of equals. For Achilles, it is more than a social contract, for only within the community of equals can he win the honor that redeems his impending death from meaninglessness. For Achilles, membership in a community of equals gives life meaning, and this community tacitly echoes the values and institutions of the original audiences for the Homeric poems in the real-life early Polis. Viewed this way, Achilles is the first citizen in Greek literature, dedicated utterly to equality. Now let me summarize the scene from Book 1, from the very opening of Book 1, for review. The epic opens in the aftermath of a raid. The Greeks have raided and sacked a city, taking from it loot and captives. Following their usual practice, they split the proceeds equally. Before shares are distributed, the leaders are awarded special prizes off the top by the group. And such a prize is called a geros, and it's usually translated as prize of honor. The group gave Agamemnon and Achilles the daughters of the city's leaders. The regular shares and the special prizes are characterized as reciprocation from the group as a whole back to individual members. What comes around goes around. I fight, I contribute to the central pile, I receive back my share and any prizes from my equals. As the Iliad opens, the father of Agamemnon's captive presents an appropriate ransom. He also bears insignia of Apollo, whose priest he is. The old priest treats the kidnapping as a form of reciprocity, namely negative reciprocity, to which he rejoins with a contribution. Agamemnon commands him to leave. Shortly, a plague breaks out in the army, killing animals and men. Apollo gives disease, so he must be angry with the Greeks. Enter Achilles. The goddess Hera prompts Achilles to call an assembly to talk about public health. A seer declares that Apollo is punishing the group because Agamemnon did not treat the priest with equality and reciprocity. He dishonored the priest, and now Agamemnon must return the daughter without anything in return. And this is where things get interesting. There we are. Agamemnon responds that he is willing to return the daughter for the sake of the group, but he wants the group to redress his loss with a replacement prize. Achilles replies that it's not practical to rewind the distribution of shares and prizes. However, the group can compensate Agamemnon after the next raid. In the meantime, and here is the key moment, in the meantime, Achilles says, send the man his daughter. Crucially, Achilles does not say please. Agamemnon explodes. How dare you command me, which is to say, treat me as less than your equal. I will take your prize and you will not stop me. There is some more back and forth, which we'll examine in a minute. At one point, Achilles begins drawing his weapon to kill Agamemnon on the spot, but restrains himself after, as we have seen, Athena advises sticking to merely verbal abuse. The meeting breaks up after Achilles announces that he and all his men will just go home. Achilles does not appear again until Book 9, when the group sends to him an embassy to persuade him to return. He responds to the embassy at length. Book 9 draws attention to the fact that Achilles has not gone home and has not made good on his threat. Now, if we add together what Achilles says in Book 1 with what he says in Book 9, and then also something he says in Book 16, we will see that he explains the reason for his rage fully. We will use that characterization to answer a question that arises at the beginning of Book 9, namely, why is he still here? More to the point, why is he restraining himself both from killing Agamemnon and then also from leaving? And if Achilles is not actually going home, then why stay put, but reject the embassy anyway? What can make sense of these apparent self-contradictions and inconsistencies? These are questions that can be answered by appealing to Achilles' desire to live in a self-ruling freedom coordinate with his equals in a system of reciprocity and mutual respect. In short, Achilles wants free and equal citizenship. Now, for a quick review of Polis terminology, especially as Aristotle uses it, we will be noticing in the next few minutes in Achilles' language signs of equality, especially deference of one equal to another equal. We'll be noticing how consent is gained by persuasive speech rather than by command. And we'll notice reciprocity in relations with the group. So reciprocity, not just among individuals in the group, but reciprocity characterizes my relationship to the group as a group. So now let's look at the evidence of what Achilles says in books 1 and 16. I mean, book 9 and 16, and then I'm going to leave the evidence from book 1 till last, because what Achilles says there can be understood best within the context that he gives later. So let's go to book 9. There are the signs of citizenship. In book 9, Agamemnon and the rest have sent to Achilles an embassy to persuade him to return to the fight. Odysseus, who's leading the embassy, he makes a long speech, ending with an appropriate recompense from Agamemnon, if only Achilles will return to combat. Achilles rejects the offer, and when he does, he uses the vocabulary that a citizen of a polis might use at any time from 800 BC to 500 BC. And here are his opening points. Notice in what he says the terminology of polis citizenship, where he talks about persuasion, reciprocity, and equality. He says, I think neither Atreid Agamemnon will persuade me, nor other Danaans, since after all there was not any reciprocity, and the Greek word is charis. There was no reciprocity, no thanks for fighting enemy men without ever letting up. The share, the Greek word is moira, the share is equal for a man if he stays put and if he should war hard. And both coward and brave too are in the same honor. He dies equally, both the man with no deeds and the one with many. When Achilles says, I will not be persuaded, he means he will not give consent. And he will not do so because there was no charis to me. And he speaks of the reciprocity breaking down. Consent is a principle, of course, of Republican government where it is reciprocal. The idea is a give and take that circulates among the equal partners. In Polis government, the equality of all the members prevents any one of them from lording it over all the others and using commands backed up with force. Instead, leaders are supposed to persuade their equals to support them and their policies. Charis is also a principle of honor cultures, and it is reciprocal by definition. Now, charis sometimes is translated as thanks, or it may also be translated as grace. And I translate it as reciprocity because that's the meaning that captures all of the others. Here, Achilles explains that he will not reciprocate and consent to the persuasive speech because there was, quote, there was not any reciprocity for my fighting. He seems to mean that Agamemnon broke the reciprocal equality and the rest of the Greeks let him do it, let him get away with it. The moment in the past is part of what grieves Achilles so. It's as if he's screaming, I wanted to graduate with my friends. Like a late diploma is not good enough. Or I wanted my gold medal at the Olympics, after I won it. It's not enough to be recognized as the winner later. Agamemnon cannot unring this bell. Please note here that Achilles is acting like the whole system of all reciprocity has broken down, that it's broken down for everybody, not just him. He continues by exploiting, he continues in the passage that remains on the screen, by exploiting the two main meanings of a single word, and that word is moira. This word means essentially, and its core meaning is portion or share, but most prominently, it is translated as fate, since fate is the portion due all mortal beings, death. In the present context, however, its basic meaning is in focus as the equal share of booty due the warrior, plus any bonus for extra honor. It's bad enough that the share for all mortals is indiscriminate, and there the share means fate. So the fate is equal for each man, as well as his share of the booty. But fighters are supposed to be special, Achilles believes. And now the same honor is given to fighters as to non-fighters, namely nothing at all, says Achilles. By implication, weighing a fighter as equal in honor to a non-fighter means ranking the fighter not among his peer fighters, but among the larger group of his peer humans. This degrades the fighter because when the system is working, he experiences special treatment. Here Achilles makes available to us the deepest reason for his wrath. It is not just that his honor has been degraded, that he's been insulted, but that the system, the whole system of reciprocal equality gave his life meaning. When Agamemnon broke the cycle of reciprocity, Achilles felt the meaning of his life drain away. He did not fly off the handle, in Book 1 anyway. He was aghast. If Achilles complains of having the portion of honor not of a fighter, but only of any old mortal, then the fighter's portion of honor would, in his eyes, weigh in the scales against his inevitable death. In this way, for Achilles, the honor from his equals would redeem death. But honor comes only from the group of equal peers who relate to each other by reciprocity and is available only to members of this group. And according to Achilles, the group of fighters is treating him no differently than they do non-fighters. This is effectively to exclude him from the group. The group matters to him because it gives him meaning, purpose, and identity. It does so by reciprocating charis in the form of honor in return for his fighting. And in this passage, he explains that there was no charis. In the next passage that we'll look at, we will see that honor amounts to citizenship. Sometime later, in Book 16, we see Achilles again, and again he explains why he became so angry back in Book 1. He continues to explain himself in the language of citizenship. He tells Patroclus, quote, "But this dire grief comes upon my heart and spirit, whenever a man is willing to despoil his equal of his share, and to seize back again his war prize, who takes precedence by force. My grief is dire, since I suffered pains in spirit. The maiden, whom after all the sons of Achaeans picked out as a war prize for me, and whom I gained by my spear after sacking a well-walled city, Agamemnon seized her back again from my hands, the son of Atreus, as if I were some vagabond with no honor or no franchise." The language Achilles uses here is so characteristic of the city-state that Aristotle cites one of these verses in the Politics to explain citizenship. In Book 3.5, Book 3, Chapter 5 of the Politics, where Aristotle defines citizenship, he says that, quote, "A citizen is said particularly to be the man with a share in the honors or franchise," the Greek word is timai, as Homer says, quote, "as if I were some vagabond with no honor or franchise," close quote from Homer. "For just like a resident alien is the man who has no share in the honors or rights." And an explanation about the Greek there, the word time, plural timai, means honor, and in the plural it means honors, but it's also used of the honors that we would translate as the franchise, meaning the right to vote full and unqualified membership in the citizen body. And so that's the expression that Aristotle sees in the Iliad, and he's pulling it out to say that this captures the essence of citizenship. But it's ambivalent between using the word time as honor in the old chest thumping sense and as honors in a more systematic and rationalized sense for the Polis. In this passage, not politics, but in Iliad 16, Achilles speaks of Agamemnon as only, let me go back to it, as only an equal or a peer. In other words, not as a commander who runs the whole show. In this passage, it's not relevant that Agamemnon is the field commander because this is not fighting. Agamemnon has violated several rules of citizenship. First, he treats an equal as a subordinate. Secondly, he reverses the reciprocal rewarding of his equal. Finally, he takes a high hand physically. These three rules might be labeled equality, reciprocity, and consent. After enunciating the broken rules, Achilles substantiates them in narrative. "First, I sacked a city and took captives, including the girl. Then, implicitly, I surrendered her to the common center. Third, the group gave me her as my share or my portion. Finally, Agamemnon took her back from me, treating me throughout as if I do not meet the criteria for citizenship." I'm sorry, for membership, I should say. So let's now, in the light of Book 9 and Book 16, let's take another pass over the evidence from Book 1, this time highlighting in the relevant passages the language that Achilles uses of citizenship. And I should say, it's not just Achilles. We're going to see that Agamemnon, when he complains about Achilles, he complains about Achilles in the same, he pays Achilles in the same coin as Achilles does him. Agamemnon says, and you see this is very, very close to the beginning of Book 1, line 116. Agamemnon says, "Even so, I am willing to give her back if that is what's better. I prefer the men to be safe rather than destroyed." Here, Agamemnon lets himself be ruled by the common good. but then he pivots to his self-interest. He commands you all, quote unquote, he commands you all to make ready a replacement prize for him on grounds that for him as the leader to go without, that it would not be, quote, seemly. Achilles counters that what's truly unseemly is Agamemnon's plan. Achilles argues from procedural grounds and grounds of practicality, and also on the elusive sense of what is acceptable to the group versus what is not. Agamemnon is thinking about his own inventory of prizes rather than the way the system works. Achilles says, "How will the great-hearted Achaeans give you a prize? We know there's no quantity of common stock laid by, but what we looted from cities has been distributed, and it is unseemly for the men to gather it all as collected back again." And there's just one word that seems to mean like something like, it would be unseemly to treat it all as like retread, secondhand stuff or something. But collecting it back again would be unseemly. Just as with the old priest, Agamemnon is refusing to play his part in the cycle of reciprocity. In a system of give and take, Agamemnon prefers only to take. In his next sentence, Achilles tells Agamemnon to just send the girl back and we'll work out a worthy way to make you whole again. He says, "But you send her back now to the god. And we Achaeans will pay you back," and I'll talk about that word, "triply or quadruply, if ever Zeus grants the destruction of the well-walled city of Troy." And that verb for "we will pay you back," if you see inside of it that TEI, S actually, that links it with the word for time, for honor. So we will pay you back. We will honor you. We will reciprocate to you with honor. Triply or quadruply is what Achilles is assuring him of. Agamemnon replies that if Achilles is trying to trick him, and just out of the blue, he says, "You're trying to trick me." If Achilles is trying to trick him, it won't work. Watch what he says, though, specifically about persuasion speech versus command speech. "And you will not persuade me. You are willing to have a prize of honor yourself, and for me to sit here as I am, going without, and you command me to give her back?" He declares that if the Achaeans as a group do not reassign to him a prize, then he will just take one himself from one of the top guys like Achilles or Ajax or Odysseus. So for Agamemnon, it's not at this moment personal with Achilles. While things are certainly heating up between the two men, Achilles has not yet become really angry. In reply, he declares that Agamemnon is proposing to violate the conditions on which all the other kings have followed him and fight ultimately for him. Since those conditions are violated, Achilles says, there's no reason for him to remain, so he will just go home. The only reason the Greeks have followed Agamemnon to Troy was to do him a favor, a charis, to increase his honor, and to gain the customary loot for themselves, which is redistributed among all the men in equal shares. Agamemnon's military command seems to depend on maintaining this system of reciprocity. If this system breaks down, Achilles says, how will any of the Achaeans eagerly consent to your words, either to take a journey or to fight with men violently? And then a few lines later, he says, but we followed you to do you a favor, a charis, striving to win honor, Time, from Trojans for Menelaus and for you, Dogface. You are not considering this, and you are not troubling yourself about it at all. I haven't mentioned yet, but every time I translate the word consent, the verb that is usually translated as persuade more fully and semantically, and it's not very graceful. Instead of translating "I am persuading you," a fuller way to understand is "I'm trying to gain consent from you." And then in the past tense, it's not "I did persuade you," but you gave consent. I convinced you. Now Achilles, still not in a rage, changes his topic to the prizes themselves. He complains his prize is never and here's a key word, never equal to Agamemnon's, even though he does the bulk of the actual fighting. In this quotation, notice how Achilles describes the system of reciprocity. These words give us evidence for the rules of the system. Achilles takes for granted that Agamemnon does not run the system of distribution, but is himself subject to it. The system belongs to the Achaeans as a group, and Achilles says, "And you are threatening to seize my prize yourself, for which I toiled much, and which the sons of the Achaeans gave to me. Never do I have a prize equal to yours when the Achaeans sack a well-founded Trojan citadel, but the greater share of furious war is managed by my hands. Nevertheless, if ever a distribution comes, your prize is bigger by much, while I, with some small thing of my own, go to my ships, since I'm worn out with warring." And he threatens, right after this, to leave on the spot. He has not yet lost his cool, however. He is exasperated, but not in a lather. Needless to say, Agamemnon feels undermined. He tells Achilles, "Just go on home and rule over your myrmidons. I've never liked you anyway. In fact, you are my least favorite." I'm paraphrasing. "In fact, I'm going to seize your prize just to teach you a lesson." And then he says, "I'm going to teach you a lesson so that even another may fear to claim he's my equal and to liken himself to me, to my face." Now Achilles gets mad. He gets painfully mad. A switch has been flipped for him, and he suddenly considers dismissing the assembly and killing Agamemnon on the spot. What flipped his switch? What straw broke this camel's back? Well, in Agamemnon's rejoinder appeared a theme he had not aired before. He expressly says the rest of the Achaeans are not his equals. That includes you, Achilles. From Olympus comes Athena just in time to dissuade Achilles, just as he draws his sword. Athena appears to him and says, I have come from heaven to put a stop to your anger, your menos, if you consent." And there's that word from Pathum. She tells him to stick to verbal abuse, to, quote, "let go of strife," close quote, and to, quote, "get control of yourself and obey us." And here the word for obey is that same word about gaining consent. And Achilles does give her his consent, and he reasons aloud that although it is hard, still, whoever gives gods his consent, him they heed particularly. So he doesn't need to say it at this point, but he's talking about reciprocity, even in relations, human and divine relations. You're supposed to give and you're supposed to get, and give to get. Achilles goes on, takes her advice. He goes on to verbally abuse Agamemnon by declaring that Agamemnon never joins in the actual work of fighting battles, but by much it is better throughout the wide Achaean army to seize gifts if anyone speaks out in front of you. Achilles says he will leave. Nestor then tries to compose the quarrel between the two men, and Agamemnon agrees with Nestor, except that Achilles wants to treat his equals as beneath him. So Agamemnon just tries to put the shoe on the other foot. And Agamemnon tells Nestor about Achilles, "This man here is willing," and here's another word for consent, "he's willing, as in it's fine with him, to be superior over all others on one hand, to control everybody on the other, to rule over everybody, and to command them, and I don't think anyone will obey, or I don't think anyone will give Achilles consent." Achilles picks up on the theme of inequality. Notice in what he says next, all the words that indicate inequality in mutual relations. He says, "Please call me a coward and good for nothing if I defer to you in every deed that you say. But give these injunctions or commands to others and don't command me. For I don't think I don't think I will any longer obey or give consent." He goes on to explain that because the prize Agamemnon is about to seize has a particular meaning, he will not fight, quote, "for the sake of the girl," close quote, as he would for possessions come by in more usual ways. The reason he will not kill anybody over the girl is because he got her from the system of reciprocity among his equals. That is what gives her value. He says, I will not fight with my hands for the sake of the girl, either with you or with anyone else, since you all are rescinding from me what you gave me. His complaint concerns the system of reciprocity and Agamemnon's violation of it. The poor captive girl is a token in the circuit of give and take among the equal warriors. By contrast, if you try to take anything of Achilles' other stuff, he will kill you. The assembly breaks up, and the epic is fully underway. So Achilles is angry not simply because Agamemnon has treated him with dishonor. Achilles is mad because Agamemnon has broken the system by which honor is recognized and rewarded. That system is based on reciprocity and equality of membership. For Achilles, membership in this group makes his short life worth living and redeems his inevitable death from meaningless squalor. In seizing what the group gave Achilles, Agamemnon is unwinding the whole system of reciprocity and treating Achilles as less than his equal and the will of the group as irrelevant. In short, Achilles claims Agamemnon has broken politics. What angers Achilles, what causes him pain, is not that Agamemnon took a high hand toward him per se, but that Agamemnon was willing to do so and got away with it. Not the deed, but the intent. That is why the predicament proves so hard to solve. Agamemnon cannot take back the fact that he treated Achilles in Book 1 a certain way at a certain moment. He cannot change that he is the sort of person who might make that mistake, the mistake of treating Achilles in a way Achilles cannot tolerate being treated. It really might surprise us to recognize that Achilles, of all people, sounds like a citizen of the polis. Usually, of course, Achilles is framed in other ways, especially as a Dark Age warrior aristocrat or a mythical Bronze Age Mycenaean king. Nevertheless, he explains himself, in the words framed for him by our poet, as a citizen in everything but name. Moreover, Achilles' words are so characteristic of the polis that, as we've seen, they're quoted in Aristotle's Politics, the one-stop shopping point for all things polis. Now let's look at some other passages in Aristotle where the philosopher describes the same polis practices and institutions in much the same terms as we've seen Achilles describe them. Let's start with reciprocity. In the Nicomachean Ethics, Aristotle declares that reciprocity is super important to the polis because it holds the whole polis together. He pictures social relations as an enormous favor bank where what comes around goes around, and you give safe in the assurance that you will also get. Aristotle says, and this is coming from Book 5 of the Ethics, but in partnerships based on exchange, a justice of the following sort holds it all together, namely reciprocity on the basis of proportion and not equality. I'm going to sip here. I must add here that the basis of proportion is the other kind of equality that the Greeks recognized. So when he says not equality, he means not straight equality, but proportionate equality. For by reciprocating proportionately, the polis holds together. For either men require it when treated badly, otherwise it feels like slavery if one does not reciprocate, or when treated well, otherwise there will be no share giving, but by share giving, they hold together. For this reason, people make, in an obvious place, a shrine of the graces, the charites, which is the plural for charis, in order that there may be reciprocal giving. For this is a particular feature of reciprocity or of grace. For the one who has been done a favor has to do a service in return, and later himself begin the favor giving. This passage concerns only reciprocity as a mechanism in social affairs it's a mechanism that manages expectations in a way that encourages members to give of themselves in faith that they shall also receive. Now let's find the other two civic values that Achilles espouses in the Iliad, namely equality and consent. We will also see reciprocity combined with these two. So now we will go to the politics. Book 2, in a long passage, Aristotle joins all three of Achilles' civic values, reciprocity, equality, and consent. And he says, for this very reason, reciprocal equality saves cities, as was said earlier in the Ethics, since it also is necessary for this to exist among free and equal people. For it is not possible for everyone to rule at the same time, but either for 1 year or for some other time arrangement. And it turns out in this way that everybody does rule, just as if the shoemakers and carpenters had traded places, and not always the same people had been the shoemakers and carpenters. And since things about the partnership of citizens are also better like this, it is clear that it is better for some people to rule, if possible, but for the same people to rule, if possible, but among people where it is not possible, on account of everybody being naturally equals, and it is also at the same time just, whether ruling is a good or not, for everybody to have a share of it. This turn-taking, and the word for turn-taking is meros, this turn-taking deference by equals to equals, at any rate, imitates their being dissimilar outside government. For some rule and others are ruled in turn, just as if they had become different persons. And in the same way, office holders become different men as they each hold their different offices. Achilles also seems to echo Aristotle when he diagnoses Agamemnon's flaws as a leader. Later than where we've seen in Book 1 of the Iliad, when he is not in Agamemnon's presence, Achilles observes that Agamemnon does not possess the intellectual character, which is what Aristotle would call it, the intellectual character a leader needs. In Aristotelian terms, Agamemnon lacks what it takes to deliberate well and enact virtue. When the heralds come to Achilles' tent to collect the poor girl, Achilles calls on those present, as well as the gods, to declare a truth in the manner of swearing an oath. In this case, Achilles swears that the time will come when he will be needed, but Agamemnon, even though he's the leader, is driving Achilles away anyway. Agamemnon is not thinking about the consequences for the group of his conduct. By thus diagnosing Agamemnon's failure of leadership, Achilles recalls the terms used by Aristotle to describe a person who cannot make decisions about their own lives well, whom Aristotle calls in the Politics the, quote, natural slave. Of Agamemnon, Achilles predicts, quote, that need of me will come to be for warding unsightly destruction off of the others. For he, Agamemnon, seethes with destructive thoughts, and he does not know how to look at the same time forward and backward, so that the Achaeans may fight safe beside their ships. This ability to look forward in time and factor both it and the past into today's deliberations for the sake of the common good, this ability lies at the heart of Aristotle's distinction between an individual nature that can handle freedom versus one that cannot. He says natural masters in the Politics, he says natural masters are those who can, quote, look ahead in thought, and that natural slaves can only do the work, but not make the plans. Aristotle claims that frequently the people who are actually enslaved are not naturally slaves, and that, conversely, many who are actually free are not naturally free. Please note that Aristotle is not calling for anyone to be captured or sold off on the international slave market, nor does he say it is better for them to be compelled to labor or punished or treated cruelly. He does, however, notice that slaves do not, as a matter of fact, direct their own lives, and also that many free people fail to direct their own lives well. This latter group includes everyone who, if you will imagine a modern retail store setting, say a Walmart, everyone who could work at the store productively, but could never manage a department like sporting goods or health and beauty aids, much less the whole store. Into this group, Achilles puts Agamemnon as lacking what is required to meet the basic criterion for being a leader of free ancient Greeks, namely prudent, deliberative judgment with an eye for the common good. At this point, I must put in a word for Agamemnon. He explains later in the Iliad that the reason he acted like a poor leader and a natural slave was temporary insanity. The Greek word is ate, and I don't think I have a slide for it. No. The Greek word is ate, which indicates that a person's judgment is clouded to the point of self-destruction. Yes, they have a word just for that. Sometimes it's translated as delusion. Anyway, in the days of the Iliad, apparently you could save face by pleading this sort of temporary insanity. It would be like a society where a defendant might be declared not guilty on account of drunkenness. Today, our analysis of Achilles' own words has shown us that the reasons for his epic rage are dominated by values more in line with polis citizens of the early archaic period than with Dark Age warrior aristocrats. He knows he is doomed to an early death, but in his eyes, his membership in a group of equals enmeshed in a system of reciprocity redeems his death of meaninglessness. He is angry at Agamemnon not just for insulting him, but for breaking the general rule against treating an equal as an inferior. He is aghast at his human war prize being taken back from him because it reverses a gift and breaks the cycle of reciprocity. Finally, he feels grief for the way the girl was seized from him by a non-consensual command followed up by force, to which it was assumed correctly that Achilles would defer, as any citizen would. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Kendall. I have a few questions from the chat. If there are more questions for Kendall as we go along, please enter more of them in the chat, and I will do my best to keep up with both the oral and the written portion of my duties here.
All right.
So the first question I'm going to ask you comes from Bill Luffel. The question is, how large was this group that enjoyed equality and reciprocity? And it's clear from the rest of what Bill writes and from the moment at which he asked this question that he's talking about how large was this group that enjoyed equality and reciprocity within the Iliad, the story of the Iliad, or among the Greek camp. When Thersites, for instance, makes the same complaint as Achilles, he says, Bill quotes, "Son of Atreus, what are you unhappy about this time, or what do you lack? Your huts are filled with bronze, and there are many women in your huts, chosen spoils that we Achaeans gave you first of all whenever we take a city." All that Thersites gets, this is Bill again, is a beatdown. So how large is this group, Ken?
And that's a great question, Bill, because it's an analytic question. I think that the group is, and I have to underscore that I think, because these rules are never stated. We have to infer them by the way the quote unquote society works. But I think it includes the people who are called kings. And that's the difference between Achilles making this complaint and Thersites making this complaint. And that Thersites passage also has the famous line when Odysseus delivers the beatdown with the scepter. He smacks, or wait, actually, it's not when he's smacking Thersites. It's when he's talking to the other kings. So Thersites is one of the men. One of the laoi, but then there's the layer of the guys who command those laoi. And the men were brought over in the ships that are all detailed in book 2. But the people who brought the ships, I believe, are the ones who are called kings. It's those kings who are the equal members of the Golden Group. And so it is that group of kings that where Agamemnon is first among equals. And another equal is his brother Menelaus, but then also Achilles, also Ajax, and everyone that's named as a leader of a group of ships from their home country. And I think this is the way that the early polis worked. I mean, this is not something we know from archaeology. This is from the primary sources who are like 300 and 400 years sometimes after the event. But that there was a process of synoikism, which means the oik means home. So they made their homes together. So what happened was you had these aristocrats owning farms and kind of managing extended families and client networks. But when they formed the polis, they all moved to town. And so the guys who moved to town, they're like the big fish from several small ponds all move to the same pond. And then there they treat each other as equals, but they don't treat the people back on the farm as equal. So it's not a democracy. Aristotle says that they're moderate oligarchies is what they look like to the modern eye in 330 BC.
Thank you, Kendall.
So kind of a small group. It's an oligarchy.
Um, I'm going to indulge myself and ask a question of my own. There's another passage I'd like to hear your opinion about that
Yeah.
I was thinking about the passage involving Thersites that Bill cited
Hmm.
as an interesting one to get you to talk about, to elaborate on what you've already said about the state of political relations within the among the Greeks in the Iliad. Another one, I'm curious what you would say about um, the manner in which Nestor tries to talk, especially Achilles down in book one from challenging Agamemnon. So I'm going to quote Fagles. I dare not try to translate the Greek live. You might have it in front of you, and if the translation is inaccurate in any way, you might check it. So um, Nestor turns to Achilles and he says, um, "Achilles, never hope to fight it out with your king, pitting force against his force. No one can match the honors dealt a king, you know, a sceptered king to whom great Zeus gives glory. Strong as you, Achilles, are, a goddess was your mother. He, Agamemnon, has more power because he rules more men." That's the end of it, right? So there's clearly some language there that suggests a relationship of superior to inferior.
Hmm.
And that seems compatible to me with some of the um, bonds of reciprocity between them that you're positing, Achilles at least theorizes exist,
Hmm.
and also possibly with a kind of equality between them. So how do you read this? Is Nestor's understanding of the relationship between them, or at least what Nestor says about the relationship between them, different from what Achilles posits? Or is there some way to square your reading of how Achilles understands the relationship between himself and Agamemnon and the other kings and what Nestor says in this passage?
So I think everybody's understanding is the same, and that Nestor is and I have the Greek in front of me, but it's like in front of me, like on the other side of the room on a shelf. And there I have like four copies of it, but the so I can't remember the exact like when he says he has more power. I'm not sure it's Duna Totaros. Um,
Uh,
it
that
might
I
be
can
he's kinglier, I think. Is that in Fagles that he's more of a king than you?
I believe that more powerful is Fairteros system.
Oh, right. Oh, I should have known that, but Charlie's not watching this talk. Yeah. So yeah, that's a special word for that he has more power or is stronger.
Yeah.
So what I see there is that like it's recognition that Agamemnon is the first among equals, but Achilles, he is first among equals. And you shouldn't be challenging a king, even if you are one. Like, that's not what you're supposed to do with each other. Now, there's one niggling point, which maybe Achilles is not considered a king because his father is alive. And everybody treats Peleus as really something, but he's elderly, and that's why he's not here. So it's possible that Achilles is, sort of like officially, representing Peleus's household, or it may just be because he's such a leading warrior that he is included as an equal. So that is one possibility that Nestor is referring to. But even if Achilles is just grouped in as a basileus, that's the Greek word that gets translated as king, that it would still matter, that it would still make sense to him, because in book two for the catalog of the ships, the poet tells us explicitly that Agamemnon's amount of ships was very much greater than the runner-up. And much less all the others. So even if Agamemnon didn't have a personal stake, meaning it was his sister-in-law who got run off with, even if he didn't have that personal stake, the fact that he is contributing not just the most, but the most by far would weigh heavily in deliberations and how much sway his socio-political equals give to him. So they would be like yes, we're equals, but he owns more shares would be a way of looking at it. How does that grab you?
Well, I mean, it sounds like there's an awful lot here, like the point about Achilles having a living father
Yeah.
for Agamemnon and Achilles' lawyers to sort out behind the scenes. But both of these points, and something that you mentioned before, the rules are never stated, are related to Elizabeth Smith's question. So Elizabeth asks, she says first, it's interesting that these personal relationships between the warriors are so legalized. The language
Mhm.
of rules and fairness and rights and reciprocity. Homer looks back to a time of orality or partial orality when,
Mhm.
I am assuming, Elizabeth says in Elizabeth's voice, I'm saying, speaking for her, there would be no laws written down. And here's the question. So, were these complex relationships, excuse me, these complex relationship rules and rights in some way a stand-in for a set of written laws?
Yes. Um, yeah, what I see, and I didn't put the following in the paper at all, is like, what do I think the poet is up to? I think that it would be like a modern day author writing a historical fiction, but then like let's set it in a non-American place before 1776, before the Declaration of Independence said all men are created equal, etc. So set your historical fiction, somewhere else. But then when the characters are trying to solve a problem and decide what to do, they decide, well, the only fair way is majority vote. Because that sentiment that that's a good way, much less the only fair way, that actually is really bound historically in time to societies that have self-rule. Because oh no, yeah, my camera's making me move around. That's very strange. Um, but so it's anachronistic, like to put in these characters' mouths a value or a practice that is known only under very specific social conditions, namely a government without a king or without an aristocracy, where it's just level equal citizens who meet and vote. So I think that in part that is what Homer is doing. Is he's receiving these myths, from the depths of oral days when the Greeks had forgotten writing and were not writing, much less anything else, writing poetry. And then Homer composes the Iliad, and he basically makes his characters relatable by making them have the feelings that you and the audience have. But everybody knows that the old days are in the rearview mirror, and that's when all the myth stuff happened. It happened, in these buildings that are, even for the ancient Greeks, were already ancient ruins, and they were very large. And so they said, "Oh, it seems plausible that heroes whose moms were goddesses, built this stuff." But anachronistically, he puts the values into at least Achilles and Agamemnon's mouths. But nowhere they lack the infrastructure. They lack writing. They lack a law code. What else do they lack? They lack. Oh well, I mean they don't have a city. They've just pulled their boats up, their ships up on the shore, and it's only in the course of the Iliad that they build a wall and a dike and they begin to have a structure. But the only time they seem to function like a polis is when they have these meetings. And so my idea is that you're absolutely right, that it's anachronistic to oral times, but that Homer is writing to literate people or to almost literate people, and putting words and emotions in his characters' mouths and hearts that would resonate with the audience.
Thanks very much, Kendall, and thanks for the question,
And
Elizabeth. The
thank you,
next
Elizabeth.
question is from Evan Ho. Evan asks, did it matter that a woman was the war prize as opposed to, say, a large plot of land or a pile of gold? would Achilles have been so enraged over a pot of gold, for example, under his principle of reciprocity?
So I think he would, but a pot of gold is not up to the level of the daughter of one of the city bosses. So like she's human captives were well, elite human captives were really valued. I mean, I say this like probably in history, but inside the Iliad, because we know that Hector, when he's talking to his wife Andromache, and they both know the jig is up and that, you know, it won't be long now before the Greeks conquer the city. He refers to the day that she's let off in slavery. And she will become like a trophy where somebody can go, oh, yeah, she used to be Hector's wife. You remember Hector was the big warrior on the other side in that war. And this is a part of the way that elites related to each other is if they could kidnap one of yours, then that person they could like force to serve menial tasks like fetching the water. Hector thinks of Andromache doing, and then used as a perennial point of dishonor for the defeated warrior. It matters that she's a female because a man would have fought to the death. And because otherwise, it's that's what it means to prefer death before dishonor. But women, the elderly, and children were not necessarily dishonored when they were kidnapped or taken prisoner of war. Does that answer the question?
Well, the second question at least, that seems to answer the
Yeah.
first question. The second is, would Achilles have been so enraged over a pot of gold, for example, under his principle of reciprocity?
So I think he would, if whatever the prize was that came to him through at that moment in that system. I use the examples of like, somebody saying, but I wanted to graduate with my friends, it's like, or I wanted the medal at the Olympics where I won it. Is like there's this, and this is also ancient Greek ethnography on this, like the moment that the athlete received that really flimsy crown of leaves, that moment is like supposed to be, like the goddess Nike is present on the site and she's radiating gold. So like this is, you can't recreate that moment. That just goes with the way the Greeks thought about equality. You have to have equality for competition to matter. Because otherwise, it's like saying, "Oh yeah, hey, the boss, oh yeah, the boss beat me at tennis today. I know he's 40 years older, but boy, he sure can move on the court." And so, it'd be like that. But instead, for the Greeks, equality meant that if you won, you're honored by other guys who might have won. Now, the pot of gold is just not enough. Because it seems clear that human captives were worth very many pots of gold, especially if they're from elite families. There are a number of times that male warriors try to be taken for ransom, and we're told that they had successfully done so before the Iliad starts. But this is, they're dishonored for doing so, but their parents are happy. But once the Iliad starts, like Agamemnon, like a guy says, please, you use me as a captive. You can get so much money from my dad. And Agamemnon, Menelaus is thinking about it, and Agamemnon just strides over and kills the guy summarily. So pot of gold, not worth enough. But the point for Achilles about being so enraged is that whatever it is that the Achaeans as a group selected to come to him at that golden moment when he is being crowned is like, hey, you had the best day. Whatever comes to him that way would cause this rage.
Thank you, Kendall. This is stirring up all kinds of new thoughts in me about Book 23, the games in the Iliad. Your point about the importance of the moment at which Nike radiates gold when the wreath is laid on someone's head is really interesting. It seems to make it more important that the wreath is flimsy, not something enduring, but that holds up only for that moment. Okay, there's one more question from the chat. If people have other questions, we have a few minutes, so you can enter them into the chat. The final question that we have for the moment is, and forgive the pronunciation, from Homer Haran. How might we teach these texts in ways that acknowledge both their literary value and their problematic elements? I might add, it sounded like you gave us a sense of at least one strategy along these lines in your treatment of Aristotle on natural slavery in the Politics, which I would venture is one of the most commonly cited problematic elements of any text. So go ahead.
You mean that Aristotle's doctrine of natural slavery is one of the most problematic? Is that what you
It
mean?
is cited as one of the
Yeah.
most problematic, most commonly cited
Yeah.
problematic elements of any text. The
Oh,
question,
yeah.
should we really teach Aristotle's politics, or how should we teach Aristotle's politics given this doctrine of natural slavery that he has, is when this question is aired, it often
Mhm.
will fasten onto that feature of this particular text. So interesting that Omar's question is coming up in the context of your exploration of that topic, but go ahead.
Oh yeah, well, and thank you so much for your question, Omar. Because if Noah's right that that's the last question, I marvel that it didn't come up earlier, because I was driving straight into the sun on that one. It's so I interpret what Aristotle's saying about quote unquote natural slavery. I think everybody gets it wrong, and so my answer to Omar is like if we teach things with in radically historical context, then they shake out a little differently. Than if we bring our modern categories and read, and when I say we, I mean I may be talking about like Christopher Columbus, because in the 1500s, and so it's not Columbus, it's the generation after him, Aristotle's politics and this doctrine was part of was cited by one contending priest at a particular debate about why it's okay for Spain and Portugal, for Catholic countries, to send conquistadors to the New World. But it was countered by who's a guy that we read? He
De las
wrote.
Casas?
Yes, De La Casas argues, and he says the other guy, he's reading Aristotle's Politics wrong. And in fact, the natives, and I've seen them, I've been there I've already spent like almost 20 years with them. They actually fit the bill for political animals, like Aristotle says. So it's worth getting Aristotle right, because in history he's been cited. Imagine a century where what Aristotle says really matters to policymakers. And so he's cited, for both sides. Pro racist slavery and con racist enslavement. And the difference that makes the difference is for trying to, well, on the one hand, not just ancient Greek, but all ancient slavery has significant differences with modern slavery that are worth talking about when we teach them. But more particularly inside the politics, Aristotle is, I think the people he actually has his eye on are the people like Agamemnon. Like Aristotle is not actually interested in theorizing slavery. And that's why he's so inadequate at doing so. He's talking about a household, and he's describing the society around him rather than designing one from the top down. And so all households in the ancient Greek world and the ancient Roman world and the ancient Mediterranean world generally, but especially those two societies, there were domestic slaves. There were there were family members, and then people who were not free and who were owned by the family, and there were not people in between. So one of the weird things about imagining the ancient world is you could not make a wage and get by. There was not a there was not a working class. There were people who did work for money, but they were very insecure. And when Another thing is that, and this comes up in Achilles when he says that Agamemnon is treating me like a vagabond who doesn't have the franchise or doesn't have honors. That is a free person in being not enslaved, but they're not free in the sense of being safe. Because if you're not attached to your extended family, then you have no social support. You're on your own in a very radical Robinson Crusoe kind of way. So full stop. My answer is to treat these objectionable issues and let them be objectionable, but very historically precise, which tends to be a different issue, tends to turn out to be a different thing than modern notions about similarly named phenomena.
Thank you, Kendall. Well, that is the end of our questions. So I am going to invite everyone to unmute themselves in the spirit, or to participate in this tradition that Kendall, I believe, initiated in the basic program, which is to basically pretend we're in an auditorium and try to give Kendall our thanks with our hands and our voices via Zoom so far as we're able. So I'm going to ask you all to unmute. Please join me in thanking Kendall for this lecture.
Thanks, Kendall.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, guys.
Kendall, that was amazing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great.
Wonderful
Okay.
lecture. Thank
This is
you.
the moment when Nikkei delivers the crown.
I learned so much.
Yeah. So
Have a good
Kendall,
weekend, all.
if you see